Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Digital++. In this unplanned episode, we are going to do a major release upgrade from Unity 2021.3 to Unity 2022.3. A couple of viewers and subscribers have informed me that they couldn't find the Hands and Controllers Manager anymore. And after some investigation, it turned out that Unity has upgraded their XR origin in the latest version 2.4.2. And unfortunately, with that, the Hands and Controllers Manager is no longer available. So let's look into that first. And then at the end of this video, I will show you a little bit of a preview of what is coming in the next parts. So let's roll up our sleeves and get into the weeds. So yeah, upgrading to Unity 2022.3. As I said earlier in the introduction, a recent update introduced a fix that's to be seen for the Hands and Controllers Manager bug that I mentioned in part 1 and 2. And so we've now moved from XR Interaction Toolkit 2.4.1 to 2.4.3. And yeah, we'll dive into that and see how that looks. The Hands and Controllers Manager is nowadays called the XR Modality Manager. Now, fortunately, it is looking fairly similar, and so there's a few updates that we need to make. And the good thing about it is that the locomotion provider is now integrated in the XR Origin. Unfortunately, the XR Origin prefab that is introduced is not downward compatible with the 1 in 2.4.1. So that means we'll have to do something to make our scripts work again. There's two options. If you are a new viewer and you want to go start with part 1 and part 2, you can start with Unity 2021.3 and then upgrade. And that's what we'll do, obviously, because we followed that path. So the second option is that you start immediately from Unity 2022.3 and you follow the video part 1 and 2, and then in parallel you have to update the code according to the changes that we will put in this part 4. It's more complex, but it is as it is. So obviously we will follow option 1. The reason that I'm upgrading to 2022.3 now is that the next videos are going to cover quite a bit of complicated code, and I want to avoid we have to retrofit all of that work when we do the upgrade later on. So rather do it now, include it in our baseline, and make sure that we're ready for the next videos. And we can all start with 2022.3. All right. So we are back in the Unity Hub. So if you haven't installed it yet, told you before in the previous videos, go to installs, make sure you have 2022.3 installed. I have 8F1. Long-term support, and you have both Android and Windows configured. And then, so you go back to projects, and what we do here is we click here on 2021.3 and we select the 2022 version. So we'll open it with that version and we do change version. You get a warning message that the project was saved with a different version of Unity, and that obviously can cause all kind of issues, and we know that. So we will push continue. And then we wait because this will take a while. All right, so it's now converted and loaded into Unity 2022. So the first thing that we will do is we go to Window Package Manager because we need to upgrade a number of packages. And they're marked by themselves. So the Visual Scripting, so let's update that. Okay. Then the Visual Studio Editor, let's update that to version 2.0.20. And last but not least, the XR Interaction Toolkit will update that to 2.4.3. So that is done. Now we go to samples and we need to update the starter assets. And different was already imported. So yes, we do want to re-import. And the same for the hands interaction demo. So this is completed. Let's open up the XR Interaction Toolkit. So if you look at the Under 2.4.3, you have hand interaction toolkit. There's a hand interaction demo and a starter asset. So look in the starter assets under prefabs. You see there's an XR origin and an XR interaction setup. And the same for the hand interaction demo. So let's go to runtime prefabs. We have a whole bunch of prefabs, but we have an XR origin hands and we have an XR origin hands setup. In part 1 and 2, we used the complete XR origin hands setup prefab. Unfortunately, that no longer exists in the XRI integration package 2.4.3. So we will have to remove all of this. And we will use the XR interaction hands setup model from the hands interaction demo folder. So let's move that into our scene. So once you drop the XR interaction hands setup prefab into our scene, you will see that the hands are pink, and that usually means that there's a problem with materials. So let's go into runtime materials, and if you click on Unity Hand Medium, you see that there's an error with the shader. So I'm not sure why that is, but let's for now fix that by clicking standard. So now we have a standard shader. We have to do the same for light and for any of the other materials that are in there that create the same error message. When we have more time, I'll try to figure out what the root cause of that is and really try to fix it, because this shader isn't the right shader apparently for this object. But anyway, so this thing has now been fixed. The good news here is that if you look at the XR origin, now the locomotion system is integrated, so we don't need to manually add that. Let's look at our XR origin. We know from part 1 and part 2 that we don't need the character controller and the character controller driver at this point, because that'll cause interference with the locomotion system. And then let's open the controllers, the left controller, right controller, the left hand and the right hand. And we select each of the ray interactors. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. You should have 4. 1 for each hand and for each controller. And then we put the maximum raycast distance to 50. So now at least we're able to reach our UI. So that thing has now been completed. Then there's a weird issue with the locomotion system. So let's open that. We have teleportation climb. We're not going to use that yet. So let's turn that off just to be sure, because I'm not 100% sure what it does and if it interferes with anything. Again, we'll look into that later. And in the turn system object, we see that both the left hand and the right hand references are used. And there's a continuous turn and a snap turn. So I don't want to use the snap turn, so let's turn that off. And let's not delete it yet. And so we don't need to change this. And then the continuous turn provider, unfortunately, there's a weird error here. So the left hand we can turn off because we don't want to do any turning with the left hand. On the right hand, for some reason in this prefab, the XRI right hand locomotion turn reference is not working properly. And you have to select the snap turn. It still works as normal, so it works as a normal turn, but for some reason this turn does not work. We'll try to fix this in the future, but at this point in time, I'd rather just go ahead and have something running, and then we will all be able to fix and optimize it later. And now we have a move provider. They have provided us with a dynamic move provider script. Could be great. I'm just going to remove it for now, and I'm going to add my original continuous move provider action based. The forward source is again the main camera, so let's change that, main camera. And for the move action, we want to move with the left hand, right? And we're going to take the XRI left hand move, locomotion move. There we go. So now we have mostly configured the prefab. All right, so that is completed. Now we need to go to our code, because now we've upgraded the XR interaction hand setup object. But you see already down here, there's an error message that hands and controllers manager could not be found. So we need to go back to our network player script. So let's go into prefabs, open up our avatar, and then double click on the network player script. So here we are in network player. So we see already that the hands and controllers manager is no longer working. So let's look into Unity what it now looks like. If you go to the XR origin, we see that there is a XR Input Modality Manager, and it looks very much like our Hands and Controllers Manager in the past. Okay, so let's double click on the XR Modality Manager. I'll copy paste the name of the class because we'll need it in our script later. And if you look carefully, it has exactly the same as our old Hands and Controllers Manager. It has an input mode, so non-tracked hand motion controller. It has now new methods to get information from your left hand, your right hand, left controller, right controller. So let's remember that. Unfortunately, there is still two items here that are the input mode that are still not public. So we need to make those public again. For some weird reason, Unity tends to undo the changes. So you have to sometimes make these changes multiple times. Maybe some of you have an idea how to fix that, but let's do that for now. Like this. So I'll do it here. Just to be sure, I'll copy paste it. Let's save this. And we go back to, whoops, you see it's already changed and it undid it. Let's save this. So when you go back to Network Player, and the Hands and Controllers Manager now needs to be replaced by XRI Input Modality Manager. And obviously it doesn't know that yet, so show potential fixes, and we have to add using Unity Engine XR Interaction Toolkit inputs. So there we go. Let's add this. This error is now gone. Great. One thing fixed. Then we go to on network spawn, and then we see a couple of errors again. So we need to get here in this line item, the Hands and Controls Manager, we're getting the component from the myXR rig. So let's change that again. We'll keep this variable HACM as it is. I don't want to change all of that. If you remember, go back to Unity, the XR origin is now no longer called just XR origin, but there's between brackets XR rig. So we need to add that here as well in the GameObject.find. Make sure you type this exactly the same way. So there's a space in here, XR with capitals and rig with a capital. Right? Make sure that's exactly the same. Good. So that's one thing. Then on the left hand, so HACM underscore left hand is no longer exists. If you look at the script, that is now called, it's just called left hand, and right hand and left controller and right controller. So we will need to move underscore, capital L, replace that with this, and we'll make this left controller, we'll make this right hand, and we'll make this right controller. So there we go, these are now fixed. The rest we can all keep the same. And then in the update function, we need to make a couple of changes because the left mode and obviously does no longer exist. We've just made this one public, if all is well. It's now called m underscore left input mode. So we will say m underscore left input. So we'll insert input, and we'll do the same here for right input mode. There we go. So that's done. And then Hands and Controls Manager obviously is now replaced by XR Input Modality Manager. It gives you another error because the mode here is changed, and it's because this is now input mode, not motion controller. So let's copy paste XR Modality Manager .input mode and replace all of this in the code below. So there we go. That none. We'll do this one here. We'll do it there. And we'll do it there. Okay, so let's now see if we can make this work. We go back to Unity and we click on play and see if everything works as we want. So for this, we will run in USB mode. We click the host button. By the way, you see still a number of errors here because of the shader doesn't have a color property. So we'll need to figure that out in the future. But for now, it's all fine. You see my controllers are working. My hands are switching and they are moving, and you see that the rays are actually working properly. So we can go back to the controllers again. So it is all working. You can switch between controllers and hands and back. I can move forward, I can move backwards, and I can rotate left or right. And it's funny enough because we are using the snap turn provider, and it's still a smooth rotation. Don't ask me why, but it is. So let's start as a host. Yep, and you see my hands are here. And I will quickly switch to the scene view. And you can see my hands are moving and everything is working. Great. Now the final thing we need to do is we need to look at Vivox. it's not automatically working in 2022.3. And for that, we need to fix a couple of things in the script. So let's go back to Unity. We open Network Manager. We go down to Network Manager, and then we go down to the Vivox player script. First of all, let's get rid of an annoying error. In the update function, I declared the underscore next update is 0 in every update cycle, and that's obviously very stupid, because that means that this if statement here is always true, and therefore at every update cycle we're sending our 3D position, which is something we really wanted to avoid. So let's delete that here, because that's not supposed to be an update, and we'll put it all the way at the top in the class definition. So put it here. There we go. One thing done. Now, the next thing we want to do is apparently Unity 2022 works a little bit different when it comes to permissions. So you need to make a copy of this line item here, the underscore VVM login, and we had to add it here under the else as well. And so what happens here is if you check, you have to implement this code, you have to check for permissions. If you get permissions, you will try to log in. If you are denied permissions, you'll try to log in anyway. And so if you don't have permission, but you're also not denied permission, then you should ask for permission. So we do that. But then for some weird reason in Unity 2022, this never comes back with a permissions granted. So we have to manually add it to enforce ourselves to sign into Vivox anyway. It's quick and dirty, so let's make a note here that we need to fix this in the future. So before we want to test, there's one more thing we need to do. So in particular, you can get some error messages on the left controller and right controller. There's a lot of components on there that we do not need. So turn off the teleporter interactor, please. So we'll do that for both the left and the right controls because we don't want to have teleportation at the moment. I think that is it. Let's give it a try and see if we can make this run. So we do go build settings, build and run. And then we will go ahead and I will pause because this can take about 7 to 8 minutes. Okay, so now it is running. Let's start my laptop on host mode. We'll run it as a host. Go to the scene. There you go. So I'm here. And then I'll join the client from... There we go. And so you see everything is working. And the audio is also working. Very good. You hear a bit of an echo, if all is right, because I'm hearing myself both on my headset as on the virtual reality system. And with that, we have completed the upgrade of 2021 to 2022. Let's go back to our slides and have a little bit of a review. So final notes and warning. I personally find it very weird that something crucial as the XR origin prefab is not downward compatible and also very unstable, right? So we've seen it, well, we haven't seen, but you can try it out yourself and maybe you have different experience. But for me, 3 out of the 4 prefabs just did not work. And there's only one that worked and we had to considerably change it. And by the way, it still seems to be faulty and cast error messages because there are shaders missing. We need to use the snap turn instead of the normal turn. And when you switch controller's hands, you still get these error messages as well. So be very, very, very careful when you use prefabs and samples in your applications. Having said that, the last thing we need to do for this episode is talk a little bit about what are we going to do in episode number 5. So in episode number 5, we're going to look into a better and much more improved avatar. So I actually already had all the code done. I had the video footage completed, and then I stumbled onto this major release upgrade, which after some consideration thought, let's just do it now. So I'm fairly sure there will be 2 parts, part 5 and part 6 to complete this tutorial. Part 5 will be really about having the avatar functional and hands and arms moving, but also the legs. I will show you in that episode how that works. And then part 6 will be mainly about how to make sure that your finger movements are accurately tracked and even all of that across the network. So that's a next big section. And then the last one, that I want to have a look at is maybe part 6 or otherwise part 7 would be a tutorial about grabbing objects, and in particular the complexity there is ownership. So the server by default owns every object in Network Manager. So therefore we need to do something specific. And as we speak, I'm still working on that code. So for now, we'll do a quick demo on how the results of the avatar tutorials will look like. There we go. And we'll go into scene mode here. All right, so again, remember this is Unity 2021. So we'll go into host mode here. So let's go into the scene. And you now see my avatar. Yeah, so there we go. Hello there. So you see me as my avatar. I'm moving. I can move my hands. I can move my head. It all works. And I can actually move. So you see my avatar making moves. It has a silly walk going forward. It can walk sideways. It can work forwards, it can work backwards, it can turn. So there's turning, great. And this all works. And obviously, as I said, the fingers are also working. So let's switch to hand. You see the hands of the avatar are following exactly my hand control movements. And obviously all of this will work over the network. So I won't demo that here now, but you will get an idea of how that works. There will be another episode, and I'm still working on that code, which will allow you to grab objects and move them around, right? And so obviously the idea is that you can grab objects and then everybody should be able to grab them. So that's all in the works, and we'll work on that in the next episode. So thanks very much for joining this episode, and thanks very much for your time, and look forward to see you soon. Bye-bye.